KTAR, Eyes on Parenting.
Kids these days, am I doing enough? Am I doing too much? This is KTAR's Eyes on Parenting, and today we're talking about foster care and adoption. I brought an expert along with me. Why don't you tell people who you are and what you do?
I'm Mac Watson from Mac and Gatos. Afternoons, KTAR News, 2 to 6, 2 to 6, 2 to 6. That's how we roll. And I became a foster parent. My wife and I did. We were certified in March, and we got our first placement in April. And 2 weeks ago, we became adoptive parents. We adopted our placements, which is very rare, by the way. Very rare.
All right, well, let's back up.
Yeah.
When did you first decide this is what foster care in general is what you wanted to do? And tell me about that process briefly.
Every year we work, Mac and Gatos Caring for Kids. We work with Child Crisis Arizona. And every year we would bring people in and they would share their foster or adoption stories. And Child Crisis Arizona used to be Crisis Nursery, and now they've kind of morphed into an agency that really trains and focuses on making sure families are great foster parents, adoption, or if you just are a parent and you want to be a better parent, they can give you some tools for that and some courses. But since working with them for the past number of years, and of course my wife and I were trying to have kids, and found it difficult. There was, and I can't remember the person, but somebody said, when you think you can't, you actually can. For some reason, that both resonated with my wife and I. For some reason, it was like, well, wait a minute, they're right. For every excuse you think, I was abused as a child, I'd be a horrible parent. That's not true. I didn't have the best family structure. I can't be a good parent. Not true. Through the process, what you learn is what your parents may have done right, what they have done wrong. If there was abuse in your life, that you are able to recognize that more than somebody that may not. I mean, they really take the negatives that you may put out there and turn them into positives. But I'm biased because we went through Child Crisis Arizona for our agency to get our training, and they do a great job. There are other agencies that I'm sure do a great job.
So that was step one, though, reaching out to an agency.
Step one was to talk about it between my wife and I.
Right.
Can we do this? Should we do this?
She needs to be on board, clearly.
And I actually talked to somebody here about it because they're like, I'm thinking about doing this. And I said, are you in a relationship? Is it a solid relationship? Because you cannot do this.
The return policy is not good with that.
Well, you both have to be on board, and you
Right.
both have to march in step, because if one parent is not in step or one person is not in step in the relationship, I mean, that's the small end of the wedge.
Right.
Because you really get into some tough questions, you get into some tough discussions. You have a child in your home who is not regulated or has, some critical issues. Do you know how to handle it? Well, yeah, I would handle it this way. Your partner may say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Right.
You really have to be on board. Both of you have to be on board in order to make sure there's a united front and offer stability. And that's the key. Kids need stability. They need love, they need nurturing, they need food, they need clothing, they need shelter, but they also crave stability. And so you learn how to give that stability, which I was interested in. I mean, once I started getting into it, I was like, well, man, I think I can do this. Because I never wanted kids.
Right.
As I always said, the mediocre gene pool of the Watson clan stops with me.
Right.
We haven't done anything big. Nobody really, aspires to anything except me. And then I get, crap for it from my family. Thanks, Mom and Dad.
So you decide
But
right.
I didn't want kids because I didn't think I had good modeling, even though I wasn't abused. My parents are nice people. But I never had that, I need to carry on the Watson legacy, or I want a son to play, football or whatever.
Sure.
I never felt that way until my wife and I got married, and through Mac and Gatos Caring for Kids started working with Child Crisis Arizona, and the almost weekly news cycle of DCS, formerly CPS,
right.
kids living in office buildings, kids being warehoused, that we really started thinking to ourselves, you know what? We can do this. We have enough to offer We need training, and that's what we did.
Right, and so the first step after you got all that worked out with your partner, let's assume people are saying, yes, we want to.
She's my wife, not my partner.
Right, with their partner,
Sorry.
or your wife or their partner.
Right.
But let's assume they want to do those. They've made the decision to do this.
Yeah.
What is the step? How much does it cost? What is the actual process?
Cost you nothing. And I'm just speaking for Child Crisis Arizona.
Right.
They make their money through the state. There may be private organizations, private agencies that may charge. Child Crisis doesn't charge anything. And we did an intensive every week 3 to 4 hour sit-down classes. And we did it within like 3 months.
Wow.
That it was every week. So we started in like November, early November, and every week we would go and sit down, and we got medical training, CPR, choking, hazards, and
Background checks, financials.
Oh
any of
yeah,
that come in?
oh yeah. There is for the state.
Right.
I mean, the state needs to know who you are, fingerprinting, all that.
Right.
But it was 3 months of intensive every week. Not only learning, but discussions and modeling behavior and what happens if, scenario, role playing,
Right.
Which I actually thought was how anybody has a child without going through these courses, whether they're biological or not. I'm like, everybody should take these courses because when they break it down, it's so like, well, yeah, of course that's the way it should work.
Right.
But not everybody gets that modeling from our parents, and then we pass on our psychoses or our bad habits or our bad behavior, that it really makes you rethink. This is a child in foster care. Think of it this way. A child in foster care has been traumatized, neglected, maybe abused, maybe all three. Put yourself in that child's situation where you've never met this family before, you have no idea who these people are. Do you trust them? Right. And how long does it take to trust somebody who may be, or they think, has basically shown up and taken them from the life and people that they love?
Right.
And that was key too, that no matter who your parents are, you are biologically, emotionally, and psychologically connected to those people, even though they may abuse, even though they may neglect.
Right.
And so to you, you're a strange foreigner person who has kidnapped them, so why should I listen to you?
Right.
And with the trauma and everything else, I'll do this. That's what's going on in a kid's head.
Right.
I try to have a conversation. I told you need to brush your teeth. We've gone over this before. You need to brush your teeth because it's important for you
Can't
to
hear it. Can't understand
So you
it.
have
Can't
to
grasp it.
you
Right.
have to re-stress. You have to be patient. You have to, again, stability. Bedtime, same time. Bedtime schedule, same time,
Right.
same routine. Because some of these kids,
Never
some
had
of these
that.
kids, they went to bed when they wanted. They're 5.
Right.
They maybe didn't have anybody to go to, so they may not tell you if they're in pain because why bother?
Right.
I mean, some of the stories. Don't get me wrong, they're sad, but you can make a difference.
Right.
You just have to be willing to take the step of, well, yeah, we can do this.
So once you move from foster care to adoption now, congratulations.
Thank you.
What's the difference? How'd you make that happen, and how's it been going?
Okay, our case was very different, very different.
So rare that this happens.
We knew we wanted to be foster to adopt, and my wife and I were trained. You're probably going to get your heart broken. You're probably going to foster for a number of years. Mm-hmm. Because the main goal of the state, and a lot of people, oh, I can't believe they take them from you. You're the better parent. The goal of the state is always reunification.
For foster care.
Absolutely.
Okay.
When a child arrives in foster care, there is a depending upon which strike they're on or whatever you want to call it, the goal is always reunification.
Right.
Our case was so different that the rights were already severed. Mom and Dad's rights were already severed.
Right.
That is very rare.
Right.
These children were placed in what's called kinship care. They were staying with family members, biologically related.
Right.
So the oldest, who is now 8, didn't understand, well, why can't I go back to my family?
Right.
Who are you?
Right.
She didn't realize she'd been in foster care since she was 3 or 4 years old.
Wow.
Because she always stayed with family.
Right.
So something came up that something came up that within the family, whether she was staying with grandma, whether she was staying with a cousin, whether she was staying with an uncle, a tia, a tio, whomever, something came up where they came into foster care. They couldn't go back to the family. So that's when we got the call. So we knew when they came to us that rights were already severed. So the process of adoption had started.
Right.
Now, usually the process takes 6 months, a year, whatever. The family can call other family members, a cousin, a relative, biologically related. So there's always that chance that somehow, some way, grandma, grandpa, uncle, aunt, cousin, whomever, can then say, we want to take care of the kids, and the state will go and look at their situation and say, okay, and then take them from us. The judge moved to adoption, and we moved to adopt the kids within 3 months.
Wow. Well, congratulations. Again, let's talk about, so for those people out there, there's this critical need for people in Arizona, for kids that need need foster care.
Absolutely.
Just real quick as we sum up, tell people your advice, your tips for both, let's start with foster care. Just some quick advice for those people considering or have already considered foster care.
Foster care can be brutally frustrating, but it can be absolutely beautiful. You really make a difference in a child's life that even though you may have had them placed in your home a month, a year, 2 years, they will still remember you. They will still remember the stability and the love you can give. And you will notice, we noticed within 2 weeks of the baby, the pediatrician told us the baby needs to be doing this, this, and this. And we're like, how do we do that?
Right.
The child started doing those things within 2 weeks. So when you think you can't, you actually can. And with 18,000 kids in the system, in the foster care system, through DCS, Arizona has a lot of kids that need a lot of love.
And then for any parents looking for adoption?
Again, our case was so rare, so much of an outlier, but our case came together so weirdly. I can't give specifics, but it was just meant to be. And adoption is so critical because what you're doing is you're taking these small little lives and you're saying, we choose you for the rest of your life.
Right.
And that is so critically important because there are a lot of kids who grow up and go through their lives thinking nobody wants them.
Well, what I thought was interesting, I think, for all parents is we all have these preconceived notions before we've had our first child, maybe even our second, of what might happen once we become a new parent or a new dad in your case. Tell me one thing or a couple things that you thought were going to happen that didn't necessarily happen once you actually got kids in your home.
Feces on the television. Through foster care training, you hear the horror stories. They really do a good job, at least through Child Crisis Arizona, of giving you worst case scenarios and then explaining those scenarios of why kids act out, why kids you may see as defiant. They're not being defiant. They've never known, or they don't understand how to act in public or at a restaurant, or why they're having a meltdown. And instead of feeding that meltdown, you can calm that meltdown.
Right.
So the one thing that I always took away is, oh boy, I just hope they don't smear their own feces on the TV. As one story that we heard, that has not happened yet, by the way.
Right.
The one thing that has happened. That is just amazing is the way these kids grow.
Right.
The stability, the routine, the schedule. These kids thrive under those circumstances because they are used to chaos, or they are used to maybe not getting fed on a regular basis, or not sleeping in the same bed every night, or and I could go into more horror stories, but I'm just giving you the tip of the iceberg, that kids really respond to stability, and they really respond to a schedule. Now, the 8-year-old will fight you on it,
Right.
because the 8-year-old thinks she's in charge,
Sure.
but that's a coping mechanism, and you
Right.
have to understand that. Again, she's not being defiant. That's the way she survived. A lot of these kids come out and they're in survival mode for a number of years.
Right.
Years. that you have to understand as a new parent.
Right. So as a new parent, though, just talking to you as a father, were you nervous? Was there anything in general where you thought, oh man, I don't think I can do this? What if they ask me a question I don't know the answer to? I literally have to teach a kid everything, not just one thing. I mean,
and we're going through that with the 8-year-old
Right.
who thought she knew how to do everything. She came to us not knowing how to brush her own teeth. She came to us not knowing grooming habits, or the grooming habits that she had learned were not necessarily beneficial to her. And of course, with the baby, everything's new. Everything is a new lesson, or a new some kind of new didactic process every day. What I was really nervous about is I haven't held a baby since I was 8 years old.
Wow.
I dropped my cousin. My mom spanked me. I never touched a child until now.
Right.
I was scared of babies. I didn't know how to relate to them. I didn't know how to talk. I didn't know. I just didn't know how to take care of them. My wife is one of 6 girls.
Right.
A lot of kids around her house. A lot of kids around her family. So I wanted a child that was older, that could talk, that we could have a conversation. So it's been really good that the 8-year-old and the baby, you see all sides at once.
Right.
And I was scared to death of holding the baby, of trying to soothe the baby, of changing diapers. And what I found is that the baby actually calms me down. Because you have to put yourself in a mindset of, I can't watch television, I can't get on Twitter, I can't call somebody, I have to focus solely on this child. So it's more like a Zen thing,
Right.
that you are just focusing on making sure this baby has the bottle.
Well, it helps because he's awesome. I just met him when you brought him in, and he is just so awesome.
He's a charmer, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely
He's a charmer.
is. So,
But the 8-year-old, you have to reteach her or unravel stuff,
Right.
and then reteach her. That's a challenge, because she thinks she knows everything, and everything is why. Well, that's not the way I did it before. That's not the way my fill in the blank did it. And you have to find a way to not shame her, not badmouth the biological family,
Right.
but also not have you come off as an autocrat or a dictator. Well, because I said so.
Right.
No, that's not going to work with an 8-year-old.
Right.
So it's been a process of patience.
But you mentioned earlier that you are learning that you can do it, and what you think you can't do, you
Yes.
can do. So
Yes.
talk a little bit about some of the good things, or maybe even something you didn't know existed as a parent, and now you're learning, wow, this is a hidden joy I had no idea about.
The technological advancements of bottles and diapers, and how to put a kid to bed with a monitor, and monitors that play lullabies. And our child, the baby, will not sleep through the night. And my wife would get up with him sometimes 3 times a night, sometimes once per night. But it was really interrupting her sleep cycle, as you can imagine, until we found something where we can talk to the baby knows we're around, and then play a lullaby, and he's back to sleep. He's learning to self-soothe. My parents didn't have that. I'd never seen that before.
Right.
So from a technology standpoint, diapers are awesome. Not changing them hasn't really changed, but there's a whole world out there of people that take their clothes that they have for their child and pass it on to other people. There's a whole foster care network on Facebook. My wife and I drove up to Cottonwood. A woman was placed with a newborn. She was looking from 0 to 5 and was expecting maybe a 4 or 5-year-old. They gave her a 2-week-old.
Wow.
She had nothing. So we had a bunch of stuff, because our baby, when we got him, was a little over. He had just turned a year. So we had a bunch of stuff that she could use. We drove up to college because of Facebook. Right. So the technology, and there's more people out there that are willing to help. You just have to find out how to find, where to contact them.
Any moments, though, for you personally, where you're like, wow, this is worth it, when you're just sitting there while putting one to bed or something?
The baby did not know how to crawl. The baby was put in one of those jumpers, we think. Mm-hmm. So the baby knew how to maneuver on his tiptoes or on his feet, didn't learn how to crawl. Wow. The pediatrician said he has to learn how to crawl. And I'm like, why? I'm thinking, well, he's going to be a track star. He's just going to take off.
Didn't even bother with crawling.
The brain has to assume and assimilate certain things in a certain order for their development. And so I had to teach, and my wife had to teach the baby to crawl. And once he got it, It's when the child, it's the look on the face of the child when they're like, I got this. I got this. I can do this. And for our daughter arrived, and we have a pool in the backyard. I know, 1%er. We have a pool in the backyard, and she was scared to death. Scared to death. She clung to the, I didn't force her in. I didn't throw her in. I didn't traumatize her. But she wanted to be in the water, but she didn't know how to swim. And so this past summer, we got her into swim lessons and took off. And again, it's that look in her eye when she says, I can do this. Now, she will claim that she doesn't know how to do anything. She has low self-esteem and little self-confidence. But when she thinks, I can do this, you can't stop her, which is great. So you just build and remember those little moments of when, the teething, and the crying, and then he opens his mouth and he smiles real wide, and it's just a row of teeth, and he looks like a shark.
Right.
You're like, that's it.
Right,
so it's little moments like that.
Well, perfect. There you have it, folks. This has been KTAR's Eyes on Parenting. I'm Corbin Carson, father of 4, 2 in college, 1 in first grade, 1 working her way out of diapers. Chances are I'm facing a question you're facing. If so, hit me up on Twitter. Maybe I can help. I'd like to thank Mac Watson for joining us. We'll see you next time, folks.